did entitle this according to the programme, but in my head, the title I've got is God in a Van from London to the Ukraine. Now, this is very, very much based on ethnographic field research, which I've been doing. This is very much an overview of that ethnographic field research I've been doing for the last couple of years, which is really looking at the relationship between food, divine presence, and societal upheaval, if you like. And I was particularly interested in the COVID context, but this is kind of riffing off that COVID context that I was mostly involved in. I might have transgressed a few academic protocols. Some of all of the pictures I've got permission to use. Most of them are mine. The main individual in this particular piece of work or presentation is very, very happy for me to speak about him directly. In fact, it would be difficult not to speak about this particular subject without speaking about Para, because he is the embodiment of it, if you like. So Food for All was set up by an ISKCON monk, an International Society of Krishna consciousness monk called Prasadam, or Para. I'll refer to him as Para from now on. And the initial idea of Food for All UK evolved very much out of ISKCON's Food for Life project, which is very much about distributing vegetarian blessed food, which is referred to as Prasadam. Now, Para had spent a lot of time working at Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is their main headquarters just outside of Watford, and he was becoming increasingly frustrated and felt that he needed a more immediate, localised kind of grassroots approach to dealing with what could be summed up as corporate food surplus in relation to societal food poverty. And he felt that a more direct approach to that was definitely needed to be undertaken. So he got a bit of funding from the Food for Life project, and he set about taking the surplus from a number of established ISKCON initiatives, cafes, food distribution, and he started to distribute it directly to those who needed it in certain areas and regions of central and greater London. Now, Para lives himself, he is poverty. He's got a really, really, really rubbish mobile phone. You know, I mean, you couldn't do anything on it apart from make phone calls. A really shabby iPad, and his current office, or at least when I was doing the research, where he coordinates a lot of what he does, is actually Starbucks in Euston Station, where he doesn't actually buy anything, and he just uses their internet and the sofa, and he calls, you know, receives calls from a number of wealthy or not so wealthy contacts. So since its initial establishment, which as far as I know was in 2017, Food for All has developed into what could be called a kind of DIY, pop-up, urban guerrilla food distribution project. And in his own words, we just cook and go. And he writes on the charity's website, Food for All works with a strong network of groups and charities who do what we can to ensure that food does not go to waste, but rather is converted into healthy, nutritious meals for those who need it. And all of that food is vegetarian, all of that food is prasadam, and it, as much as possible, tries to uphold the standards of sattvic food, which is a broader kind of Hindu quality of food, which is very pure. It tries not to involve, in this case, tries not to involve onions or garlic or anything like that, food colorings, etc. Not always possible, I think, in this context. But he also works with organisations like the Felix Project, which is one of London's largest food redistribution charities. He works with a number of supermarket chains, and also works with a lot of independent food retailers as well. He's also set up a network of corporate partners, HSBC, for example, Virgin Media. Many of his primary sponsors and endorsers are bankers, wealthy independent business people. Basically, he just goes to rich people and rinses them. But he also works with a lot of actors, media personalities, musicians. For example, some of us in the room might remember the Pretenders. Chrissy Hind is one of his main sponsors. Also, other sponsors include ex-members of the Sex Pistols, Peter Doherty, Boy George, Paul McCartney, for example. He's been awarded the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service in 2021. Now, one of his longest running projects is taking a van with hot food, pre-prepared hot food, along with lots of boxes of food charity, corporate supermarket donations, and he stops off in lots of different points around central London, mostly around the Camden area as it goes. Other deliveries are taken by an army of volunteers and devotees, and they get on these rickshaws and they go around various destinations in inner London. Up to about 2023, the whole operation was running out of a massive underground car park, which was directly underneath the headquarters of Sainsbury's in Holborn. And it was known as Krishna's Castle. And it's here, where there's a large amount of storage area. There were kitchens. It had its own shrine, which housed the images or the murtis of Radha Krishna, who are the main focus of ISKCON. However, in 2024, they started working out of a disused school in Euston. So everything was moved from Krishna's Castle to Euston Station, or just around the corner. And it's here that the food is rescued, and it's stored, and after preparation it's turned into prasadam, which is actually the absolute backbone, the spiritual backbone of the entire operation. In short, prasadam is food which has been prepared and offered to the divine in the murti form, and it becomes imbued with spiritual potential, becomes very valuable potentially, spiritually speaking, and it's distributed to those who are in need. So briefly, in the wider ISKCON world, the murti is understood as the embodiment of the deity. The image is infused with divine prana, or breath, in a ritual which is known as prana prachista. And once that's been completed, the representation is understood to be transformed from a non-sacred image into a living, breathing, blessing, hearing, eating manifestation of the Supreme Godhead. And also, there's a common understanding that the murti, once it's undergone prana prachista, is actually anchored to the very spot where the ritual took place. In effect, the murti is immovable. The nature of food for all, however, requires something more than just a static representation of the divine. The divine, if it's going to fulfill the needs of this operation, which by its very nature is mobile, needs to be able to travel. And there is a solution. Radha Krishna are movable in this case, but they remain very much resident in the main shrine. But when it comes to the divine travelling in the delivery van, the presence of Krishna becomes manifest in the images of Gaura Nitai. And you can see Para holding him up there. Gaura Nitai are enlisted to bless the food out in the field. Gaura Nitai respectively are Chaitanya, who's a manifestation of Krishna, and he's the 15th century founder of the Bengali Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and Nityananda, who is his eternal companion, both of whom are very, very much central to the lineage of ISKCON, right down to today through Prabhupada. Now, in this instance, Gaura Nitai sit on the dashboard of Para's van, and they bless the food when it's being delivered in central London. And as Para explains in his own words, we would not have Radha Krishna sat in the van driving about London and having to meet all the homeless guys falling about the place. But there's no problem with taking Gaura Nitai, even into a war zone. So Gaura Nitai seems to make things a lot easier. But how does that work in terms of blessing the food and movability? Well, one possibility I'd like to offer is during research with another Bhakti tradition, the Gujarati saint Jalaram Bapa, I came to understand that there's a more fluid form of prachista, which is known as chalit prachista. Okay, so chalit prachista means that the murtis can be moved from one place to another. Both prana and chalit are rituals of consecration, and the deity is fully present when the image is there and now referred to as a murti. However, whilst prana prachista ritual can take up to about 3 days, chalit prachista can be done in a much shorter period of time with less ritual protocol, and it doesn't require the presence of a Brahmin priest. In essence, they become portable. Their presence can be experienced in any appropriate location. And more importantly, the presence of a deity can then be experienced in multiple locations simultaneously as they bless food. So that could be in Camden, or it could be in a swimming pool in Kherson in Ukraine. Why a swimming pool in Ukraine? At the beginning of 2024, I was in the back of Para's van delivering food, and it was very sunny. And suddenly I noticed these shafts coming through these small holes, these jagged holes in the van. And they hadn't been there previously, so I kind of asked what were these holes, where did they come from? And he explained that they were shrapnel holes left by exploding Russian rockets 2 weeks before. So to explain, the other journey that Para takes since February 2022 is through Germany, Poland and to the Ukraine. And he's accompanied by Krishna in the form of Goranatai in the van. And since the beginning of that particular conflict in the Ukraine, Para and an extensive network of devotees, Eastern European ISKCON devotees, have been feeding those people who've been dispossessed, people in need of food. And now he's actually set up an entire network of kitchens all over Ukraine, from Kyiv to Donetsk region. They set up kitchens from virtually nothing in underground stations in Kharkiv, parks in Mykolaiv, and to get back to the swimming pool, more extraordinarily, in a swimming pool in Kherson. Now, this was owned by a wealthy businessman who built himself a luxury home, a huge pool in the grounds. The Russians invaded, had to leave before letting Para and his group of devotees set up a field kitchen and in this particular shell. Now, normally the food would have been dedicated or rather offered to rather Krishna in a formal shrine, preferably a temple, and then it would be distributed after that. But in Kherson, that was out of the question. The deities had to be removed from the temple. They were taken to an undisclosed place, and then the Russians actually occupied the temple. So it was once again 2 minutes. Time to bring the presence of Goranatai into the food operation, and they continue to make the food. It's offered to Goranatai under the sacred gaze. They put on clean clothes. Everything is done according to the protocol, but it's all in this swimming pool. So hopefully, very brief presentation, no real critical framing rather. But I think this is a really good example of an interaction between lived religion in the form of a contemporary expression of Christian spirituality, innovative utilization of traditional understanding of the presence of the divine, and also a sustainable food distribution model, which is now spanning from London to the Ukraine. And also, this spontaneous DIY pop-up urban approach to distributing prasadam is made possible through the presence of Krishna, through the forms of Goranatai, and in the words of Para, you just stick Goranatai in the van and off you go. Thank you.